My teen mom abandoned me with a kid's pitiful apology note when I confronted her with it. 24 years later, she just collapsed, whimpering, "I always thought you decided you were better off without me." I stayed silent. That was weeks ago. Yesterday, I had 78 missed calls from her, each one. Just a sobbing mess. My parents gave me up for adoption because they were still in high school when they had me. 24 years later, I found them. My mom had me when she was just 14, and I, 24M, was given up for adoption. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? My parents told me about her growing up, and I still have the letter she wrote me, asking if they could give it to me when they deemed fit. It's crazy reading it sometimes and knowing it was a literal child who wrote it, saying she's sorry she couldn't be my mom but hopes I'm happy. She was open to having contact, but we moved from my dad's job when I was 11, and then it seemed impossible to find her. But luckily, I did. She's working at this small restaurant, and I keep going, but she doesn't know it's me. We talk sometimes, and she seems like a nice lady. Sometimes when she says something like, "Do you want to refill, honey?" or uses another term like that, I want to tell her and let her know that I'm right here. I don't know why it makes me nervous. We talk sometimes, and she seems really genuine. If it's not super busy, she's more open to talking about random stuff. I literally drive 2 hours to come eat at this place just to see her. And it's like she knows me already because I'm there once or twice a week for the past 3 months, so she always says hi with a big smile. But man, if only she knew. Update 1. Well, I did it. I told her. And yeah, it was pretty heavy. My heart was beating super fast the entire time. I waited for her to finish her shift, and until they were done closing up the restaurant. After she finished closing up, she saw me waiting in the parking lot. I told her there was something serious she needed to know. First, I apologized for keeping it from her for so long. She didn't react until I actually pulled out her letter. Then she started bawling, screaming, and crying at the same time, and I didn't even have to finish the whole "I'm your son" speech. She just saw it and knew. The next thing I know, she's hugging me instantly, but then she pulled back and asked if it's okay to hug me. Of course it is, and we're just there hugging and crying in the parking lot. It hit her hard. Her legs gave out for a second, so I had to actually hold her up. What really got to me was her saying, "Look how big you've got." She went back to open the restaurant, and we sat in there for hours talking. She told me that the second time I came to the restaurant, she got a feeling that I felt really familiar, but it was hard to believe it could be me. She told me that for years after I was adopted, she would see kids around my age and used to think they were me. Then she would start crying in public. It really messed with her mind and made her depressed. She said I look so much like my biological dad when he was younger. We talked about him too. They stayed in contact with each other, in case I ever reached out to one of them. I didn't have any hope about finding my biological dad since he was never mentioned, so I'm glad they both planned for this. She told me about how they both wanted to keep me, especially my biological dad. He didn't want me to be adopted, but he knew they had to because they were just kids. That's why he didn't leave anything behind, because he didn't want to believe he would ever get to see me again. We talked for hours, until almost 2 o'clock in the morning. She wanted to know everything about me, but her main concern was, am I happy? Were my parents good to me? Did I have a happy childhood? And I did. I told her thank you for helping to give me this life. After my 18th birthday, she was hoping I would find her. That's why she stayed in the same city. But since I didn't, she always thought maybe I resented her, wasn't told I'm adopted, or maybe had decided it was better not to have her around. It made me feel bad for not telling her sooner. She told me it's not my fault, and I did the right thing by going at my own pace. The way she kept looking at me with the biggest smile made me emotional sometimes. It makes you think, how can someone who's been a total stranger your whole life look at you with so much love? We exchanged numbers, and after I left, she sent a text thanking me for giving her this gift. My girlfriend came over and she hugged me while I cried happy tears. Everything went better than I expected. Update 2. Lots of you asked about meeting my biological dad, and to say it was emotional is an understatement. This was more nerve-wracking because I didn't know anything about him. With my bio mom, it was different, because I watched her from afar and got to know her a little before it all came out. I asked my bio mom if she could be there too, so it was the two of us waiting for him at this park. He was already crying before we even got to him. He pulled me in for the biggest bear hug, and we were both crying. He told me he wants me to know that they loved me so much, and he loves me. I lost count of how many times he'd come back in for one more hug. This definitely got to him, and he kept saying, "Thank you, God," while looking at my face. Hearing him tell me how much they loved me even back then meant so much to me. My bio dad said he cried so many times just driving over here. He didn't think he had any more tears until he saw us. When we were all sitting down, it hit me that my bio mom was not kidding when she said we look alike. He brought gifts too guilty about wanting to know more about my bio parents. They gave me a really good life, so for a while, it felt like maybe to them, I was showing that it wasn't good enough for me, and I'd rather have my bio parents. But they told me many times they want me to do this for myself, and they know how much I love them. And I really do. Finding them and meeting them was hard, but it was so worth it to me, and seeing their reactions made it feel even more worth it. The emotional risk I took in reaching out has been repaid 1,000-fold in new connections, in understanding my origins, in filling in the blanks of my own story. The next day, I woke up to a text from Lawrence, my biological father. He wanted to meet, just the two of us. We hadn't really spent much time alone together, always with my bio mom as a buffer, and I was hesitant, wondering what he wanted to discuss. But something told me I needed to go, some instinct pulling me toward this meeting. The morning light filtered through my bedroom blinds, casting striped shadows across my rumpled sheets as I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button before typing a simple yes. We met at a small diner near his construction site, the kind of place with vinyl booths and waitresses who call everyone Hun. The diner smelled of bacon grease and coffee, with the clatter of plates and murmured conversations creating a comfortable background noise. A bell jingled over the door as I entered, a few heads turning briefly before returning to their meals. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, highlighting the worn spots on the linoleum floor and the small tears in the booth upholstery. He was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with a napkin he'd torn into tiny pieces, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. His large frame seemed almost too big for the booth, his knees bumping against the underside of the table. When he saw me, he half stood, awkwardly, before sitting back down, a flush creeping up his neck. The napkin confetti scattered slightly as his movement disturbed the table. "Thanks for coming," he said, standing awkwardly before sitting back down, his work boots scuffing against the linoleum floor. His voice was quieter than it had been in the park, more uncertain without my bio mom's presence. A waitress appeared at my elbow, coffee pot in hand, eyebrows raised in question. I nodded, and she filled my cup, the rich aroma rising with the steam. Marilyn told me about the letter. He shifted in his seat, the vinyl squeaking slightly beneath him. His hands, rough from years of manual labor, looked out of place against the white ceramic of his coffee mug. I noticed a small tattoo on his wrist, a date that I realized with a jolt was my birthday. I nodded, not sure what to say, stirring sugar into my coffee just to have something to do with my hands. The spoon clinked against the sides of the mug, the sound suddenly seeming too loud in the pause that had fallen between us. Through the window beside our booth, I could see construction workers in hard hats moving around a site across the street, and I wondered if those were his colleagues, if that's where he would be heading after our meeting. "Look, there's something you should know." He took a deep breath, his calloused fingers tapping nervously on the table. A truck rumbled by outside, momentarily drowning out the diner's ambient noise. He waited for it to pass before continuing, as if what he had to say was too important to risk being missed. "That letter?" I wrote one too. "On your 18th birthday, and your 10th, and your 5th. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them back for too long. His eyes, so similar to mine, held a mixture of hope and fear as he watched for my reaction. The waitress approached with menus, saw our expressions, and quietly retreated, sensing the gravity of our conversation. He pulled out his wallet, worn leather creased from years in his back pocket, and removed a folded piece of paper. "I keep this one with me. It's from your first birthday." His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it, handling it with the care one might give to a precious artifact. The leather of his wallet was worn thin at the edges, molded to the shape of his body from years of daily use. The paper was worn thin from being unfolded and refolded countless times, the creases so deep they'd nearly torn through. The ink had faded in places, but I could still make out the words, "Happy birthday, little man. I wonder if you're walking yet. Your mom says most babies are by now." The handwriting was messier than it is now, more youthful, with sharper angles and heavier pressure on the page. There was a small doodle in the corner, a stick figure holding what looked like a balloon. My throat tightened, a lump forming that I couldn't swallow past. The ambient sounds of the diner, the clink of silverware, the hiss of the grill, the murmur of conversations, seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Outside, the sun emerged from behind a cloud, sending a shaft of light across our table, illuminating the faded ink of the letter. "You wrote to me every year?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, higher than usual and slightly unsteady. A waitress passed by with plates of steaming food for another table, the smell of pancakes and syrup wafting over us momentarily. Lawrence didn't seem to notice, his attention entirely focused on me and the letter between us. "Not every year, just the big ones, and sometimes random days when I missed you too much." He looked down at his hands, strong hands with dirt permanently embedded in the creases of his knuckles. "I never thought you'd read them." There was a quiet resignation in his voice, as if he had made peace with the idea that these letters would remain unread. private expressions of a love that had nowhere to go. "Can I?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The diner seemed too loud suddenly, too public for this intensely private moment. A child laughed at a nearby table, the sound bright and jarring against the emotional weight of our conversation. "They're at my apartment. Some of them. They're not all happy. Some are angry, like when the adoption agency wouldn't give us updates. Some are just me telling you about my day, pretending you were there." He ran a hand through his hair, the same gesture I make when I'm uncomfortable, leaving it slightly mussed. The similarity was uncanny, a physical manifestation of our shared DNA that made my chest tighten with emotion. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I want to see them." The words came out stronger than I expected, with a certainty that surprised even me. A couple at a nearby table glanced over, curious about our intense conversation, before politely looking away. The waitress approached again, this time with more determination, and we quickly ordered, neither of us caring what food we chose, both focused on the conversation at hand. After lunch, I followed Lawrence to his apartment, a small one-bedroom in an older building with a fire escape zigzagging down the brick exterior. We drove separately, my car following his pickup truck through unfamiliar streets. His neighborhood was working class but well kept, with small yards and older cars parked along the curb. Children played on the sidewalk, jumping rope and riding bikes, pausing to watch us pass before returning to their games. It was surprisingly neat, with a bookshelf full of paperbacks with cracked spines and a guitar in the corner, its surface polished from years of handling. The apartment was small but tidy, with simple, functional furniture that looked well used but cared for. Sunlight streamed through windows that faced west, giving the space a warm, golden quality. There were few decorations, a landscape painting above the sofa, a small collection of model cars on a shelf, a framed construction permit from what must have been a significant project. "You play?" I asked, gesturing to the guitar, its strings gleaming in the afternoon light streaming through the window. It sat on a stand in the corner, obviously well used but meticulously maintained, the wood glowing with a warm patina that only comes from years of handling. A music book lay open beside it, the pages dog-eared and marked with pencil notations. "Started when you were born. Thought maybe someday I could teach you." He shrugged, embarrassed, running a hand through his hair, the same gesture I make when I'm uncomfortable. Stupid, right? His eyes darted to mine, then away, as if afraid to see judgment there. A car horn sounded in the street below, momentarily drawing our attention to the window before the silence returned. "Not stupid," I said quietly, noticing for the first time that my hands are shaped exactly like his. I held mine up, examining the similarities. The same broad palms, the same slightly crooked pinky finger, the same pattern of veins visible beneath the skin. The genetic echo was undeniable, a physical connection that transcended our years apart. Lawrence went to his closet and pulled out a shoebox, faded and taped at the corners. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each labeled with a date. Some were birthday cards never sent, their cheerful designs a stark contrast to their purpose. Some were just folded notebook paper, the blue lines visible through the thin sheets, all addressed to me, in handwriting that grew neater over the years. The box had a faint, musty smell. The paper inside yellowed slightly with age. It was heavy in his hands, weighted with years of unspoken words. "I'll let you read them alone," he said, heading for the door, keys jingling in his hand. "Take your time." He paused in the doorway, looking back at me sitting on his couch with the box in my lap. And for a moment, I could see the 16-year-old boy he had been, forced to say goodbye to his child. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone with 2 decades of his thoughts. For the next 2 hours, I read through 18 years of my father's life, spread out on his living room floor with sunlight shifting across the carpet. His struggles in school after I was born, teachers who looked at him differently, friends who drifted away. The letters chronicled his journey from a devastated teenage boy to the man I had just met, each page revealing another layer of his life without me. Dropping out of college because he couldn't focus, always wondering where I was, if I was okay, if I was happy. His first construction job, coming home with blistered hands but proud to be earning money. The time he saw a little boy who looked like Marilyn in a grocery store and followed him for 3 blocks before realizing what he was doing, then sitting in his car crying for an hour. The letters were painfully honest, without the filter most people apply to their communications, as if writing to me gave him permission to express his rawest emotions. Some letters were angry, at his parents for pressuring them to give me up, at the system that made 2 teenagers feel like they couldn't be parents, at himself for not fighting harder. These were written in heavier strokes, the pen sometimes tearing the paper slightly, the words slanting sharply across the page. Reading them felt like witnessing a storm, the intensity of his emotions leaping off the page and into my chest. But most were just sad. a profound, quiet sadness that echoed through years of birthdays spent wondering what kind of cake I liked, if I was opening presents somewhere, if I even knew I was adopted. These were the hardest to read, the simple, everyday moments of missing that accumulated over decades. The questions about whether I had lost my first tooth, whether I liked sports, whether I had friends at school, the imagined conversations and shared activities that existed only in his mind. In one letter from when I would have been 7, he wrote, "I drove by a school today and saw kids your age playing at recess. I parked across the street and just watched for a while, trying to imagine which one might be you. A teacher saw me and came over looking suspicious. I drove away before she called the cops. I probably looked like some creep, but I just wanted to see kids your age, to picture what you might be doing right now. Are you good at sports? Do you have friends? Do you like school? I hope whoever tucks you in at night knows how lucky they are." The paper was tear-stained, the ink blurred in places, making some words difficult to decipher. By the time Lawrence came back, I was sitting on his couch surrounded by open letters, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. The afternoon had faded into early evening, the quality of light changing from bright gold to a softer amber. The sounds of the neighborhood had shifted too, fewer children playing, more cars arriving home from work, the distant sound of televisions and dinner preparations filtering through the open window. "I'm sorry," he said from the doorway, the smell of coffee wafting in with him. He held 2 cups from a nearby cafe, steam rising from the plastic lids. He looked uncertain, hovering in his own doorway, as if afraid to intrude on my emotional process. "I shouldn't have dumped all this on you at once." He set one of the coffees on the side table nearest me, careful not to disturb the letters spread around me. "No, I needed to see these." I picked up one from my 16th birthday, the paper slightly stained with what might have been beer or tears. "You wrote that you hoped whoever taught me to drive was patient." The letter was dated exactly on my 16th birthday, as if he had known the significance of that age milestone and had been thinking about what it meant for me. He smiled slightly, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of his eyes. My eyes. Was someone? He sat down in the armchair across from me, cradling his coffee in both hands, his posture tense as if bracing for my response. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the similarity in our profiles as we faced each other. My adoptive dad, took me to empty parking lots for weeks before letting me on actual roads. He'd grip the dashboard so hard his knuckles would turn white, but he never raised his voice, even when I nearly hit a shopping cart. The memory made me smile, my adoptive father's calm voice guiding me through 3-point turns and parallel parking, his patience never wavering despite my many mistakes. Lawrence nodded, a flash of pain crossing his face at the word "dad," quickly masked with another smile. "Sounds like a good man." He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving my face, studying me over the rim of his cup. A car alarm went off briefly in the distance, then fell silent, the interruption barely registering in the emotional space between us. "He is," I said, then added, "You would like him." The words came out spontaneously, but as soon as I said them, I knew they were true. Despite their different backgrounds and life experiences, there was a fundamental decency in both men that would allow them to find common ground. "I'm sure I would," Lawrence replied, his voice thick with emotion. He cleared his throat, setting his coffee down on the side table with a small thud. "Anyone who raised you to be the man you are deserves my respect." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, without a trace of the bitterness or resentment that might have been understandable under the circumstances. "I don't know what to call you all," I admitted, gathering the letters into a neat stack. "It feels weird calling you Lawrence when you're my father, but it feels wrong calling you Dad when that's what I call the man who raised me." The question had been bothering me since our first meeting, the language inadequate to describe the complex relationships that now formed my family tree. "Call me whatever feels right," he said, sitting down beside me, the couch cushion dipping under his weight. "I'm just grateful to be in your life at all." He reached out hesitantly, then placed his hand on my shoulder, the touch light but firm. Through the window, I could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, pinpricks of light against the deepening blue. I nodded, carefully placing the letters back in their envelopes. "Can I borrow these? I want to read them all properly." There were still many I hadn't gotten to, years of thoughts and feelings waiting to be discovered. The weight of them felt significant in my hands, a tangible record of a love that had persisted despite absence. "They're yours. They always were," he said, his voice catching. "I wrote them for you, even when I thought you'd never see them." He helped me gather the remaining letters, our hands occasionally brushing as we worked together, the simple task creating a moment of ordinary connection that felt extraordinary under the circumstances. As I left his apartment that evening, letters tucked safely in my backpack, I realized that family isn't just about blood or birth certificates. It's about love that persists, even when there's no hope of it being returned. It's about a teenage girl writing a letter to a baby she'll never see grow up. It's about a young man writing birthday cards that will never be opened. And it's about the people who choose to love you every day, who teach you to drive and help with homework and create the person you become. I'm still figuring out how all these pieces fit together, how to balance the parents who raised me with the ones who created me. But for the first time, I feel complete, like I'm finally seeing the whole picture of who I am and where I came from. And that's worth every moment of uncertainty, every tear shed in restaurant parking lots and diner booths, every mile driven to find the missing pieces of myself. Walking to my car under the streetlights, the weight of the letters in my backpack felt like a bridge between my past and future, connecting all the versions of myself I had been and would become. The night air was cool against my face, carrying the sense of someone's dinner cooking, a neighbor's garden, the distant promise of rain. I looked up at the stars, bright points in the darkening sky, and felt a sense of peace settle over me, the kind that comes from finally finding your place in the universe, from knowing that you belong not just in one story, but in many.